Welcome to Southern Cooking Made Simple, where everything is homemade. Today, homemade pizza crust. Hello. Today I'm making some pizza crust, and I wanted to bring you guys along. I just put 2 cups of warm water into my mixing bowl, and I'm going to add in 1 1/2 teaspoon of yeast. Now, the reason I'm only going to use a little bit of yeast is because I want the yeast to do the work for me. I don't want to add a whole lot of yeast, and to make it rise really quickly, I want to put in a small amount of yeast so it'll rise slower, and then you get more flavor that way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to the yeast, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar, and the sugar feeds the yeast. And what we're going to do now is set my timer for 10 minutes, and I'll be back, and I'm going to proof this yeast. Yeast is real good and bubbly down in there, and you know that your yeast is working. Then you can add the rest of your ingredients. If you add them too quickly, then you've ruined your dough. You don't want to waste all that expensive flour on bad yeast, and that's why you proof it. So I have my dough hook, and to that I'm going to add 4 cups of flour, 1/4 cup of olive oil, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Now I'm going to let this mix on low for 5 minutes, and you will get a really moist dough from this recipe, and it'll be real sticky, but that's okay. You want it to be sticky because the more stickier it is, the more volume you get in your pizza crust. It'll cause it to expand and have bubbles in there, and that gives you a good chew, and it makes it be crispy on the outside. It's delicious. You're going to love it. Now, when you're making your pizza crust, you always want to have it to be to the consistency that it is sticking to the pan. So if you stick with a good recipe, then you don't have to worry about the consistency of your dough. We have everything incorporated in there, and all the dough is formed from the flour. Then we're going to turn that off, and we're going to set the timer for 5 minutes and let all of this flour congeal and start to activate, and I'll be back. Rest now for 5 minutes. Now I'm going to let it knead for exactly 13 minutes. So I want you to set your timer. Now see how that's sticking to the pan? I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of flour. I don't want it to stick to the pan all the way up. I want it to stick to the pan only in the bottom part. Now we're talking. Okay, I'm going to set my timer for 13 minutes, and I'll be back. Okay, our 13 minutes is up, and see how beautifully smooth that has blended. So I'm going to turn it off. And now we're going to cover it. I'm going to first cover it in saran wrap and then in aluminum foil, and that is going to hold in all of the heat that this has generated from mixing and from the warm water. And I'll be back after I get this covered.